Well, welcome everyone back to the Worship Workshop podcast. It is finally 2025. We are finally here. I didn't think it would make it 1 month into the podcast, and we got a great group together today. Before we get started, two announcements. One, this is the month of a bunch of podcast episodes. I am releasing one every single week this month. I ended up recording a bunch in December, and I have way too much stuff on my hands, and I don't want to sit here on 3 months worth of podcast episodes and not record anything for a while.
I think he means he likes to yap.
I do. I
yeah.
love to yap. So we'll have one every single week. We have this one this week. Next week we have one about sharing your faith in college. And then 2 weeks from now, I think we're having one about going into ministry with my guy Justin here.
Yep.
Speaking of Justin, he is doing a challenge from camp this past year where he's trying to raise money for 10 people. Is that right?
Yep, 10 people.
So he has an Instagram. I'll link that below. I'll put the link on the YouTube and Spotify that you guys can go find him and find what he's doing and just support him in any way you guys can.
Yeah, so basically my Instagram page is just going to be mainly people just sharing their testimonies from camp and just how it has changed their lives. And so, yeah, just to show that.
Perfect. Well, yeah, you guys can find that below, and I'll give out more details about that later. But I think getting started, I think Eden's going first. So Eden,
Yeah.
let's start with your testimony. Let's start at the beginning. What was growing
No,
up for
we
you
should
like?
start at the end, bro.
It was a dark and stormy night back in 1989.
All right, let's
Yeah.
start. Let's start from the tell me what growing up was like for you.
Well, I grew up in church, and we pretty much at the same church for most of my life. We bounced around between a couple of different churches for about 2 years, middle of my childhood, but we were at the same church, and I'm still at that same church for most of my childhood. And I mean, I knew that my parents had incredible faith, and I knew that that was a priority in our lives. And we had for a bunch of years a family Bible time every single night, you know, and we would sit down and we'd talk about our day, and we'd typically read something, but oddly enough, it was never really the Bible. We would read well, first of all, we were young, so I would have been probably 8 and 9, 10 years old maybe, which means that my youngest sibling would have been 1, 2, 3 at that time. So for us to, as a family, crack open the Bible would have been quite daunting, and the younger siblings wouldn't have been able to keep up with that.
I recommend starting in Leviticus.
No, Charlie. Leviticus. No, my friend. The first episode my friend was talking about it, he was like, yeah, I started when I started reading the Bible, the first book I ever read was Job. And I'm like,
Whoa.
That's crazy.
what? But anyway, back to
Job's
Leviticus
kind of
is
a banger.
fun. We'll
Job's
talk
a
about it
banger.
later, though.
Job is a banger, but not when you're a baby.
Starting off is, yeah.
Starting off is kind of crazy. You're
Yeah,
special,
a little
Charlie.
bit.
But yeah. Anyway, back to you, Eden.
Yeah.
So growing up, you guys are reading. You said sometimes reading the Bible.
Sometimes, but if we did, it was like the storybook Bible.
Okay.
Yeah. So like not really diving into scripture ever. Even though I was at a point where I probably could have been and should have been. I was at this kind of pushed to the same level as my younger siblings, you know? And I never really saw my parents doing their own Bible time, so it wasn't like even a thought of like I should be doing this. But when I was 8 years old, my best friends at the time were both getting baptized, and I was like, I know that this is something that I should do, and I kind of know what I'm doing, and so I'm going to get baptized too. And I had the conversation with the pastor, and it went the way that it should, you know. But I didn't get baptized at the church. Our family went to the beach, and I got baptized at the beach by my dad.
Sick.
That's cool.
Yeah, which is actually pretty cool.
I got baptized by my dad as well.
Really?
That's one of my favorite things I've ever said. Like, I got baptized by my dad, and then I got to baptize my brother, which is the coolest
Yes.
story. But
Oh, and I got to
Yes.
baptize my sister. It's incredible.
that's awesome.
But I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I was 8 years old. And it wasn't the forefront of my life. So I didn't move forward in my faith for years. And also being in the household that I was in, nothing was hard either. So like there wasn't anything that made me turn to God, you know?
Yeah.
So that was my life for 4 years, and then when I was 12, things got kind of hard. I have I have 2 sisters, both of which are adopted. And what most people don't really know is that there was a 3rd child that was adopted. And he is the half-brother of my youngest sister. We adopted him when I was 8, and he would have been 4. And when I was 12, things started happening. He had ODD, and so he was very much defined against all sorts of authority, and that really negatively affected our family. Also, we were all homeschooled, so we were constantly at home with my mom, and she was the main figure of authority in our household. So he would lash out at her a lot, and it was pretty much a nightly thing of us girls were put outside because mom and dad didn't want us to be exposed to that kind of stuff. The things that were being said. He started going to school, so then he started picking up stuff like that at public school, so swearing and threats and all sorts of things, which we didn't know. I was 12, my sisters would have been 11 and 4, so we didn't know what was going on. Now I know that there were some major things going on. I remember being sat down one time. My mom sat down with me in her closet, and she goes, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something. We've been working with an agency out of Montana, and a new family is going to adopt John." I can say John because that's not his name anymore. But they told me that they were going to place him in a new home out west, and that the family knew about all of his issues and they were okay with it. We were in a position where financially and realistically we couldn't help him with his issues. The therapies that were available to us here weren't working. The meds weren't working. And any additional therapies that he would have needed, we would have had to be in Jacksonville or Atlanta all the time. And for us, that was unrealistic. We were the type of family who had white bread sandwiches and spaghetti night dinners all the time. Money was tight. So we couldn't afford that. I didn't understand the decisions that my mom and dad were making at the time. But like I said, now I do. I know why we had to lock our door when we went to bed every night, you know? Mm-hmm. And it was, for us, it was just normal. But through all that, he ended up moving off, and he's, from what I know, doing great now. But he moved off, but it was a very odd thing, and there's no comparison, because the brother that you had for 4 years gets adopted by another family.
And he's just, like, completely gone. Because he was on the other side of the country, so you, like, never got to see him.
We still have not seen him. It's been, what am I now? 28 years. That's crazy. Like we have not talked to him at all. So, but through that, I had to turn to God, because that was the only thing that I felt stability in. The church that I had been in was fantastic, and the youth group that I was in, that was when our pastor was Skylar White, and he was fantastic. And I don't think he knew what was going on, but he knew something was going on, and he really helped me through that. And I ended up getting baptized, rededicating my life at 12 years old, because I really understood it at that point. But my faith didn't go anywhere, because once again, I didn't have a foundation of, like, this is how I live my life as a Christian. I didn't have an example to look to. Because I could have gone to small group leaders and whatnot, but I didn't. And so I just was like, all right, I guess I'm just going to open my Bible and read it. But I didn't have a way of, like, really growing in that. And I slowly through high school got further and further from God. When I was a student, there were 3 big things in my life, right? There was school, there was church, and there was dance. And dance was expensive, and we paid for that. And so if anything happened with school, the thing that got taken away from me was church. We weren't paying for church. I didn't have to go to church.
Yeah.
And this was when a lot of things I saw my parents' walk with God change drastically. But we were paying for dance, so I still went to dance, but I didn't get to go to church. And so I started to slowly drift from God. And then COVID happened.
Oh, COVID.
I was 16 when COVID happened, and I was in my sophomore year, I think.
Which, okay, side tangent. Everyone, like, always loses it when they find out, because all three of us were in 8th grade.
Which is crazy.
Which
Yeah,
is
in the 8th
insane
grade, yeah.
that we were 8th graders when COVID shut down, and here we are, freshmen in college. But anyway, it's just crazy
Yeah.
to think about, but continue.
And I got on social media in ways that I had never been on social media before. I'm very grateful that my mom utilized Covenant Eyes, because I probably would have been on sides of the internet that I should not have been on otherwise. And I started getting influenced by a lot of things that were not of God. And I started questioning my faith, and I started questioning my sexuality, which was crazy. I genuinely had a phase where I was like, I might like women, I think.
And it was that weird time where you're stuck in a bubble,
Yeah.
and with social media, the only thing that you hear is like what your algorithm's telling you, and you don't get to go talk with people or see like normal people. So it's like the only voices you hear is the algorithm. And it was like, looking back, it's so terrifying.
It really
when
was.
You don't have that community, like you don't have your friends to go and be like, I'm feeling this way, and then be like, especially like in the Christian world, like if you go, hey, to a friend, you're like, hey, I'm thinking about this, then hopefully your friend's accountable and be like, no, that's not what the Bible says. But then like when you have nothing and you're in middle or high school, and then all of a sudden, like your whole life is, I'm going to school and seeing my friends at school, and then all of a sudden you're shut down, you can't do anything, you're stuck in a building, and all you get is your algorithm. It's some horrible things can happen. But continue, because you were like, so is this still like peak COVID time frame when all this is happening?
Yeah, I would say, well, first of all, I got a TikTok account beginning of 2020, so before any COVID actually happened.
I actually did the same.
Ooh.
I got a TikTok in like February of 2020. But continue.
Dangerous little game.
Yep.
So yeah, and then really on it all the time, because I was doing online school as well. I was homeschooled, but all of high school was online for me. So when everybody else was like freaking out over Zoom classes, I was like, this is my everyday, guys, calm down. But I was just chronically online. I was online for school, and then I was online for TikTok and Instagram. I didn't have a phone, so I was doing it all on my computer.
Really? You didn't have a phone?
I didn't have a phone until I was 17.
So
Yeah,
that's
same.
So
Same
that
too.
that makes it even harder, because at the same time you're like chronically online, but you can't just go text your friends.
I couldn't
right?
text anybody.
So
No, I
it-
had Instagram to
That's
text people.
That's
but yeah.
crazy. Okay, continue.
So yeah, that was all happening, and then to top it all off, a month into quarantine, my dad left, and he didn't live. He got ousted. He got kicked out of the house. And for us kids, there was never fighting. There was never any sort of anything that would make us question their loyalty to each other, their marriage being valid, nothing like that. So it was just like, your dad's moving out tonight, and his stuff was on the couch. And it was like, okay, wow, okay. So we have to figure this out. I remember having a conversation with my mom that night, and it's not important what was said. What is important is that I was mad at him for things that didn't happen because of what I was told. And that damaged our relationship and further pushed me into this spiral of like, why is God doing this? And then also this spiral of, well, maybe relationships aren't worth it, which then spiraled into, okay, women, which is an awful spiral to find yourself in. And that was the spiral I found myself in until senior year. I was 18 in senior year. I started senior year at 18. And I got into church again, and I got into production, because I was like, if I'm going to be in church, I need to lock myself. I knew that where I was in my walk with Christ was not okay. I knew that I was not seeking God at all, and I knew that I needed to be. And I knew that if I had to be at church all the time, my mom wouldn't tell me I couldn't be at church.
Yeah,
So I was like,
that's fair.
I gotta lock myself in somehow, man. So I got into production, which is how I met Lucas. But I was like, I gotta get into production. And I had that commitment, but then once again, I did terribly in senior year. So that got ripped out from underneath me as well. But senior year was still better. And I started that, well, actually I started production end of junior year. That summer, I went to camp. And that was the camp of my dreams. Like, that was, like, the perfect camp experience.
Was that 22? Was that our first year back at
First year
Milligan?
back at Milligan.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And that was the perfect camp experience. I had a Kingdom Worker video that year, and I had, I was a perfect little poster child. Little did anybody know what was going on in my brain. And I had my entire friend group was there, and my mentor from middle school was back volunteering again, and I was close with my youth pastor as well. I was super confident and was the senior who would walk up to any table of kids and be like, is anybody sitting here? And sit there and have a conversation. That was me. And so I had astounding confidence and walked out of there with a boyfriend.
Oh, gosh.
It all went downhill.
It
all
all went downhill from there, because not only was that a focus, I had school and I had production, and so then Mom was like, well, I can't take the boyfriend away from her, so I'm going to take church away again. And so I spiraled again. And at the end of my relationship with that guy, I remember him saying, like, the person that you are right now is not the person that I met at camp, and I need you to be back in church. And so then it was like, all right, I got to fix school so that I can end up back in church, and I did. But I didn't start. I got back into production to a point where I was doing it every single week, and that helped. And being in that environment helped as well. But I still wasn't pursuing God. I still wasn't until this summer, and it changed this summer because both my best friend, she really got serious about her faith, and Lucas got serious about his faith.
Let's go.
And
W. Lucas.
I
Lucas.
was one of the people. I was one of the people that Lucas would call when he was like, guess what this cool thing that I learned about God was? And so then he ended up discipling me, and I was like, dude, I gotta get on this bus too. Like, I really have to start pursuing God. And it was between the two of them being on fire for God that I was just like, all right, we're doing this.
That was during my hibernation phase.
Yeah.
Like, it was during my, I only talk to Christians and I only hang out with Christians, and just like cramming myself with knowledge. And so it's cool to watch other people get down that same path. But so that was the summer. So how has this last semester been? Because it's now Christmas time.
Don't ask me that question because
No.
you know.
I know, but I'm asking for everyone else to know, because
No, it's valid.
it obviously you started seriously taking it serious, but obviously, as we all know, things don't always go smoothly. And so just how has this last semester been, and then also how does that compare to before you took your faith like seriously and seriously pursued Christ?
This semester has had its ups and downs. I started on that just upward chug of like I was waking up in the morning and starting my day with, the little verse of the day thing on the Bible app, and I would continue listening to worship music until I was halfway through my shift, and then I'd switch to the Bible Project podcast, and then I was allowed to listen to anything else. And then I would get off of work, and sometimes I would do a Bible time at that point, and then I'd go home, and at night I'd do a Bible time too. So I was like really pouring into everything.
Sometime in there, I would call you and we'd have an hour-long conversation about the
Yeah.
most random biblical topic. But so then, continue.
And that was the routine for 3-4 months, and it was great. And then I met a man, and that was okay. It wasn't bad, but he was a baby Christian, and came to me as a lot of people come into my life, as a damaged human being who was seeking some sort of stability. And for some reason, I provide that, which is great. But also, I don't get attached to people because I know that they're going to leave once they fix their issues. But I got attached to this one, unfortunately. So I thought he was going to leave. But we ended up, he was like, I really want to pursue my faith. I'm at a point now where I'm like, I'm done chasing everything else in this world. I want to focus on God. And I was like, cool. Well, I'm reading John, if you want to join me. And he did. And for our entire relationship, every day we read a chapter of the Bible. But what ended up happening was my Bible time at night was then occupied by this guy too. So it was like I still had my morning time, but the evening was now occupied by, okay, so this is what I took out of this passage. What did you take out of this passage? And it broke my evening Bible time. So he has been out of my life for a month now, and it's been a struggle where sometimes I can sit down and I can read whatever passage I'm supposed to read, and sometimes I just look at the Bible and I'm like, I can't do it today, you know.
Yeah.
So it's hard. I'm struggling again.
It's always a fun recovery time.
Yeah.
I'm coming out of a season like that too. I was on fire for a few months, and then October and November I was like crashing and burning.
Yep.
And so it's clawing my way out of it and getting back into the habits that I had before.
Yeah.
But by the way, if you guys hear anything, that's my neighbor. I don't know what he's doing. He's wanting my
Just
attention.
peeked around the corner.
But thank you for
I think
sharing.
he wants to come
Of
on the
course.
podcast. You should bring him on next episode.
For sure.
We'll have him one day. Maybe when he's older. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
I love.
Yeah,
It's a
thank
great
you.
story every time I hear it. But next is Charlie.
Oh,
So
geez.
I'm gonna-
up next, I suppose.
Here we go.
Yeah, no, you're gonna do great. I'll start in the same place I asked Eden. What was growing up for you like with your house and just how things were?
Yeah, so growing up, my family was in the military, so we lived a lot of different places and we went to a lot of different churches. I was born in Maryland in Bethesda, then we moved to San Antonio, Texas, then we moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, and we moved to Anchorage, Alaska, and finally back down here to Richmond Hill. Now
Georgia.
I'm off at college at UGA.
Yes,
so-
Georgia. By the way, I forgot to mention to you guys beforehand, we do name drop in this podcast. So if you want to name drop anybody in this
Name drop.
podcast, feel free. Location and name drop. But
The
anyway,
location
What do
is
you mean?
crazy.
okay, maybe not like house addresses, but name drop is it if you want to mention anyone's name in a story.
All right, here's
Don't-
Lucas's address. Let me just give you a quick bit of info
Anyway,
here.
continue.
So yeah, I had an experience going to a lot of different churches growing up, and it was kind of just interesting to like experience kind of the faith from different backgrounds, which I'll talk a little bit more about towards the end of the story. But I got baptized when I was 5 years old. I went to a Christian school during that time, so that was around, I think, kindergarten or first grade, not exactly sure. But I think kind of the story of my walk with God has just come down to growing and understanding, because just like you can take something, you can simplify it, but you don't really understand it fully. Like, for instance, okay, I'm kind of a nerd. So I'm
By
gonna
the
give-
way, for anybody who does not know Charlie, he is a physics student at UGA. Physics, right? At
Yes.
UGA. So he is the most like intellectual reason, everything.
Big
like,
brain.
Yes, big brain reason, trying to understand everything people. So that gives a little context.
We try to understand and we fail to understand. Unfortunately, even the most rational and logical decisions made by humans are still guided by undercurrents of emotion. But we try our best. We try to be objective. We try and look at the facts. And let me just get back to what I was talking about. I'm going on a tangent right
Going
here
on a
now.
tangent. Yep.
But what I mean by not fully understanding something, okay, so like for instance, when you're in school and they show you a picture of like an atom and you see like the orbitals and you have little circles around them with the electrons, yeah, that's not wrong, but that's not really the entire picture, because you then take more chemistry and you learn about the different suborbitals and the little shapes they make, and one is not really not true, it's just it's not a full understanding of the picture. And that's the same thing for me with God. I mean, when you're younger, you don't really fully understand who God is. I mean, as a 5-year-old, you can't even comprehend. I mean, as someone who's been studying the Bible for 95 years, even, you probably can't even. You're not going to know everything.
Yeah.
But I think that was kind of my struggle in this. I mean, I'm walking with God through elementary school. I'm walking with Him through middle school. But this is kind of when I hit a little bit of a roadblock. Like, I realized this is just something my parents have been doing. I've just been following what they've been saying. I've just been going to church. What do I actually believe? Why do I believe this? And I realized I didn't really know why I believed in what I believed. So this kind of interesting thing. I mean, I feel like you should have a reason for what you believe. So you start doing some investigating, and this is kind of a tumultuous period of my life. This is around middle school. This is COVID is about to happen right here.
Okay.
I'm in Alaska. Get pulled out of my school to do partial homeschool. So I'm going to school for part of the time and then being homeschooled for the other part. My parents thought it would be better for my education that way.
You just were too big brain for the classes.
But I think it was just a time of kind of meaninglessness. I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing. I kind of felt directionless. I didn't know where I was going. And it was really kind of a stressful time. I was already an anxious kid growing up. I was always trying to do well in school, trying to please my parents, trying to please these different people. And this weighed on me pretty heavily. And then feeling this directionlessness and not understanding why I believed what I believed, it really, really bothered me. Neighbors' kids.
Yes, neighbors' kids.
But from there, it's kind of been growing into trying to understand who God is. So I went on YouTube, I'm watching all these different videos, I'm listening to these debates between these atheists and these Christians, I'm reading C.S. Lewis, I'm just doing all this studying, and I'm trying to understand who God is. But, I was understanding, I was learning more about God, who God is, but I realized that was only part of the picture. So like I said previously, as you're growing up, you follow this, you know who God is, sort of. You learn, you grow, but you just, how do I articulate this? You're just not entirely sure. So at this point, my point is I had the head knowledge, but I didn't know what actually living for Christ was like yet. I still felt incomplete. I felt just like pervasive meaninglessness. And then my family moves from Alaska to Richmond Hill during COVID. And this is kind of a little bit of a crisis for me because I know nobody. I was really kind of down in the dumps for the first part of high school. Like all of freshman year, I was kind of struggling to find people I related to well, trying to meet new people, make friends, and I wasn't finding contentment, and I still wasn't understanding why I believed what I believed. But as time goes on, I joined Compassion. I started going to youth group. Going to church camp helped, I think, really renew my faith, because as much as you like to think, you can't just study and learn and have all this head knowledge but not actually apply it. I mean, this was the mistake of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They knew everything about God, yet they completely missed the points of the Bible. They missed that Jesus was the Messiah. And this was kind of what was happening to me. I got from a phase of not knowing to understanding more, and finally to actually knowing God instead of just knowing about God.
Yeah. Well, we need to pause for a second, and we'll come right back, so give me 1 second. All right, well, we're back. I had to go have a talk with the neighbors' kids about not being too loud and trying to run around. But, Charlie, back to what you were saying.
Yeah.
So you had the understanding, you knew the head knowledge, you knew everything, but you were having the problem of, like, living that out.
Definitely didn't know everything.
I mean, of course,
I thought I knew everything. Little did I know, I barely know anything. But sorry, what were you saying?
So so you were talking about like camp highs and that stuff. So where did that start to shift as far as going from knowing all the knowledge to living it out as well?
I think at this point it kind of came down to trying to show the love of Jesus in my life to other people, I can be kind of an abrasive person at times, and I know this. I have a tendency to have conflict with people. I like to argue a lot. They're laughing because they know.
Just a bit.
You should have seen this kid in high school in orchestra class. Anyway,
the Bible says you will recognize my disciples by their love, and that is I think the surest sign of someone who is a strong Christian. You go up to them and you just see kind of a joy, you see a peace, you see a contentment that is just sadly lacking from so many people in kind of this post-Christian world we live in. I mean, I feel like we definitely see this nowadays. People pursue things. They pursue different hobbies. They pursue relationships. They pursue money. They pursue different things that think they're going to give them pleasure, give them happiness, and what the world conventionally says is successful. I know my roommate in college recently told me that he has his formula for happiness and success completely planned out. He's gonna go make a bunch of money. Oh, I'm sorry if you're gonna listen to this right now.
no, go ahead. Keep it continue.
We can have a conversation about this later. He's gonna make a bunch of money, and he's going to retire early, and this is going to be invested, so it keeps coming back to him. He's going to work on his relationships in between, fulfilling his finances and trying to build close personal relationships. Ultimately, he's going to receive complete contentment in his life. So I think there is importance. You can't really be completely happy if you're living in just absolute poverty and you don't have any food to eat, and you can't really be happy if you have all the money in the world but no close relationships to you. But I feel like this misses a very important aspect, a more spiritual aspect, a connection with God himself. You've got to fulfill both, you got to fulfill like all three of these aspects of your life.
Yeah. So, like, walk me through. So we're freshman year. So it's after freshman year. You're starting to get comfortable. You're getting involved. So was there any moment that had like a major shift for you in your way of thinking or your relationship with Christ or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I could point to any moment in particular. Like, the walk of all Christians is kind of just a series of ups and downs. You get really into it for a while. You're like, I'm reading my Bible. I'm doing this. I'm going to church. I'm going to youth group. You have this sort of vigor for the Lord. But then you taper off and you you just lose that first love that you had for the Lord. You lose that first love that you had for Christ, and things unfortunately start going back downhill again.
Yeah, and so now you're a college student at UGA. So what has it been like in the last few months as a Christian? Because there's always people that talk about how like the faith is so dead in college and all this stuff. So how has it been as a Christian at a school, like away from your family, all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely been interesting. I've always thought that the more you study, the more you research, you're eventually going to come to some conclusion. I mean, okay, we have the truth, right? The truth is this thing that we're all looking for. And if we just go down these different branches of knowledge, we're going to eliminate this possibility and eliminate this possibility. And eventually we're going to get this singular, consistent system that tells us exactly, like, okay, we're going to know the evidence is stronger in favor of God, or the evidence is stronger against God. I mean, I kind of always knew you're not going to know for sure. I mean, people have been arguing about this for the past 10,000 years.
Yeah, ever since communication was a thing, people have been arguing about this.
Yeah, I'm usually pretty successful at arguing with people and having these conversations, but when I got to college, I met some people that were equally matched to me, if not better than me. And this kind of made me realize you can definitely have this knowledge and you can defend it well. The church has been defending it for the past 2,000 years. But ultimately, from a just purely rational, logical standpoint, I think atheism and Christianity are equally matched. And the only really way you can know God is real is to have a personal relationship with him and to have a connection with him and to experience the peace he provides for you in your life and see the change he moves in others. See the love of his disciples.
Yeah. Well, Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah.
It's definitely a different one than a lot of other people, but it's just as important. And if you guys want to know more about reason versus feeling and all that stuff, we have an episode that came out actually last week when this is posted that for us we're recording tomorrow. So go back if you're interested. Go listen to it.
Not
I'm
the backwards schedule.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
don't worry about it. I'm sure it'll be great. So
Yep.
just go listen to that. Well, last but definitely not least, we have my great friend Justin. So I guess I should have done this for everyone, but Justin, a little bit about you. You're going into ministry as a what's the title again?
I'd call it a missionary bush pilot.
Missionary bush pilot.
yeah.
Okay. So a little bit about you. Have you always been in Savannah?
Yeah, I mean, basically my entire life, right outside.
Yeah,
Savannah.
and always at Compassion?
No, I actually,
No?
so I grew up in a Baptist church and then moved to Compassion when I was like 8 or so.
Okay.
Because the church that I had been going to had some stuff going on.
Like every church does. So let's get started at the beginning. Just growing up when you were little in your
Okay.
household, what was that like?
Yeah, so growing up, of course, like my family's very strong Christians, deeply rooted in their faith. So we went to church like every Sunday unless we were sick or something. So yeah, growing up, I was always in Bible schools, Sunday school, stuff like that. We went to VBS, things like that. And it was actually one summer at VBS, I don't even remember it too vividly, but the card that they gave us was like the ABCs of salvation. Admit that you're a sinner, believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, raised from the dead, and then C, confess that he is Lord and Lord of your life.
And D, get dunked.
Indeed. They didn't have it back then, but Compassion did add that, yeah. So yeah, I remember getting that and realized like my parents had talked to me about it, like, and it was around when I was 6 when I kind of understood it, like if I don't get saved then I'm going to hell, which is kind of a scary thought for a 6-year-old. So I feel like when I was baptized when I was 6 years old, it was more of a fire insurance kind of deal. I had the head knowledge, but not really that, like, kind of what you were talking about, like Charlie, not that deep connection or like relationship quite yet.
You know of God, but you don't know God.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for,
Yeah.
I think.
And so, yeah, I was baptized and stuff, and then my faith really wasn't my own. It was really, I just relied on my parents a lot because they were the ones bringing me to church and stuff like that. I didn't really read my Bible at all besides Sunday and Wednesdays. Yeah, so then years go by, and then middle school starts, and then stuff really got to be real. Not so great stuff.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know about you two, but middle school was like the moment where my innocence died, and like that was just where it all went downhill.
Middle school was awful.
How about you, Eden?
I quite enjoyed middle school.
Okay, so that
High
makes-
school for me was the rough patch.
I didn't like high school either.
COVID on out was pretty sick.
Well, at least the start of middle school.
Not
was
in a good way sick,
Yeah.
but really bad sick.
Yeah.
Sick and twisted.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, really, end of 5th grade, start of 6th grade, middle school. That's when, yeah, like you said, kind of the innocence went away. People were talking about stuff. Won't elaborate on that too much. And then also just, I don't want to take too much time to explain my situation in middle school, but I was stuck with the same 25-ish people throughout the entirety of middle school, give or take a few, just because I was in the upper level classes. So these 25 people were really the only friends I knew. I kind of had friends at church, but we didn't really meet each other outside of church. But I did sometimes with my middle school friends. And they were definitely not the greatest role models. Definitely not the best people to look up to, which I did. And so that really did not help me with my faith. And I eventually got to a point where I had like suicidal thoughts and stuff like that. I never did stuff like cutting myself or things like that, but I was definitely thinking about it. There's some days where I would open the upstairs window, take the screen out, and just look down which is a scary thought.
Yeah, I had similar experiences towards the end of middle school when I was talking about just like feeling that meaninglessness in my life.
Yeah.
Crazy thing that not a single soul knows about, but we're gonna confess on a podcast in front of everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have cut myself before during like some horrible times back in middle school. So yeah, middle school sucks. But anyway, yeah, nobody knows
Moral
that.
of
Now
the
the whole
story.
podcast does.
Yeah,
But
well.
continue.
So yeah, so 6th grade, 7th grade, not so great, but it was the summer before 7th grade, I'm pretty sure. I went on a mission trip with my church to a place called JARS, who I want to fly for. They do missionary aviation and all kinds of other support for missionaries who are translating the Bible into people's native languages, like out in the deep jungles of the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, stuff like that. And so one of the days, so we were there for the week, and one of the days they took us on a plane ride, and I'd been in a helicopter before, but I was like really, really young. But that was my first time actually being in like an airplane. And so we went up, and I had my head glued to the window the entire time. It was such an awesome experience. And so I was thinking during this ride, I was like, people get paid to do this? That's what I want to do. So the entirety of 7th grade was, I'm like, I'm going to be a pilot. I'm going to be working for the airlines, making like six figures, something like that. I had a plan for my life. I was like, this is going to be great. And then, but I still had those suicidal thoughts and stuff like that. But it wasn't till the summer before 8th grade is when I went again, and I heard the testimony of this guy. He's actually a retired JARS pilot, and his name was Mr. Nard. He actually grew up in the Philippines, didn't know Jesus. Then JARS came to him, and the Wycliffe Bible translators, they translated the Bible into his native language, the ones that he grew up talking, the language that he thinks in and stuff like that. So that's why it's so important that people have a Bible in their own language, because like, yeah, you know what I mean?
It's one of those things as English speakers, like, we don't realize how crazy it is to just be like, yeah, there are people that have never heard any of the Bible and have never had access to one. And
Yeah.
it's a game changer, because like the Bible is just so important and such a good resource that it's just like, it's a game changer when you get it translated finally into your
Yeah.
language. But yeah, so you're coming out. So yeah, you're
So-
at this camp. What happened next?
So one night, Mr. Nard was giving his testimony, just his whole story of how he grew up. JARS came, he became a Christian, and then became a pilot for them. He did that for so many years, and I don't remember all of it, but I remember just afterwards, I was just sitting and thinking, like, I felt a tug on my heart. I was like, God, is this what you want me to do? But JARS pilots don't get paid. They don't make any money. You have to like go to churches and stuff and like ask for people to support you. So I'm like, how is that supposed to work? Of course, he's already retired. It worked for him, but I just couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that I don't just get a paycheck for what I'm doing, you know?
Yeah.
And so that lack of security, I was like, nah, I think I'm gonna pass. And so a few weeks later go by, I'm still thinking about it, and I went on another trip to Tennessee to a place called
With
Ability
me.
Ministry.
Yeah, that's where I met you, I think.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, Ability Ministry is a place that has older disabled adults, and they live there and stuff. So it was one of the days we were riding in the van back from the hayride or something like that. But we were just listening to music in the car, and we were playing some of the songs that they like, and one of them is Love the Lord by Lincoln Brewster. You remember that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that one was playing in the car, or the van. And so I had heard that song like a million times before, but this time when I heard it, something changed. So the song is talking about, I know it's in Matthew, I don't know which of the other four Gospels it's also mentioned in, but when the Pharisees asked Jesus what's the most important commandment, and Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so that song is basically singing about that. And then, so it says, but there's a part in the song where it switches up and it says, I will serve the Lord, my God, with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. And when I heard that, I was like, God was speaking to me, and I was like overwhelmed. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Be emotional, man. We're all here. There's nothing wrong.
Yeah, that was so. Yeah, my eyes were open, and I was like, I know for sure God wants me to do this, and which is, it's crazy to think about. And so, yeah, after that moment, I knew this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to chase after this. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. And so going to high school, I'd kind of forgotten about all the suicidal thoughts and stuff because it kind of really went away after that because I felt like I had a purpose in life. God revealed it to me. So COVID was tough. Didn't really hang out with anybody. And then going to church really helped out a lot. And so let's see, we had actually gone to a camp after COVID, like I think I did 3 times in high school. So the first time it was I think it was 2022.
So we had conference, which was the one in 2021.
Yeah, that was at Compassion.
That was at Compassion. And then 2022, yeah, was the first one where we were back at Milligan.
Yeah, so it was like June 2022, but the January before, so January 2022 is when my great uncle had a fall, and he had to go to the hospital, and we found out that he had like late stage lung cancer because he was a smoker, and so it kind of wasn't a surprise, but it was definitely not good news. So that whole first half of the year, I just watched him progress to just skin and bones, and that tore me up. Yeah, so, and he actually ended up dying the week before camp, and so I was going to camp thinking, like, my uncle just died, and I'm leaving my family, like, why would I do that? And so I didn't really want to be there. I know camp was going to be fun, but I mean, like, I felt terrible leaving my family and stuff. So the week was great.
Did you know that that's where we met?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's
me,
when-
you, and Charlie were all put in a room together.
Yeah.
And that is how we met. And
That's
that is why we are
wild.
all on this podcast together. Because, like, I knew
Yeah.
Charlie because he was he played violin in the orchestra with
He
me.
was stuck with me.
I was stuck with him. And he was in my family's small group. So I was really stuck with him. But then we had a room together. I'm like, who's this Justin Barrett guy? And then we met you. We're like, this
This
guy's
kind of
amazing.
weird.
I bet I was back then.
We still think that, Charlie. Anyway, so you're at camp. Your uncle just passed away.
Yeah.
So
And so one of the nights I don't even remember what we even did that night or what the pastor talked about, but one of the nights we played Firm Foundation by Cody Carnes. And when I heard that song talking about Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand, when everything around me is shaken, I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus. So when I heard that, I just felt it's like I felt God saying, yeah, you just lost your uncle who was more like another grandpa to you, but I'm still here for you. I will be here for you till the end of the age. And it's so crazy to think about how he would just come for me in a time when I was like at my worst, you know. So yeah, so camp went by. That was great. Next year at camp, after that year, I take that back. It was more really, as we were talking about, like middle school, lost your innocence with that whole, I'll just say, dark side of the web. That stuff had gotten really bad that year. And it was actually, it was summer 2023 is when, we were rooming together again. And it was one of the days where we had free time. And it was just me and you in the room. And we were talking, and I was like, I'm sick and tired of looking up stuff. And because I knew it was definitely impacting my relationship with God. Like I had zero progress, it felt like, with him. Because I don't think there's really a way that you can progress with your relationship in Christ while you deal with that stuff. At least I couldn't. And so it was actually that day or one of those days during that camp is when I asked you to be my accountability partner. And ever since then, it's been so much easier. Of course, still fall down sometimes, but
We all do. We all do. Yeah.
But that's just another example of why camp is so important. First one, my uncle just passed away, and then I felt so comforted by God. And then next one, got my accountability partner. And then summer 2024 was we had just graduated high school. That's 3, not you. You've been graduated.
I was old.
And so we're all, I don't know about y'all, but we're all thinking like, this is our last one. It's gotta be great. And we were going to a new place this time, like an actual camp rather than a college campus. And yeah, it was all fun and stuff. But the theme of the camp was the rest of your life. And so it was kind of talking about Psalm 23, and you can add on to this. And so it was talking about not only like rest, like having peace, but like, can you explain this?
I don't know where you're going with this.
Okay, well,
I think contentment would that be kind of.
yeah, kind of, lost that. But anyways, I was talking about Psalms 23, and just that whole week, I just felt like I learned so much on how to walk with Jesus, like actually truly live out your faith and stuff like that. And so I feel like after this past camp, like my life has truly been more of a relationship with him, like actually truly chasing after him, like trying to read my Bible every day, even though miss some days sometimes, but it's been more of a actual true relationship with him.
I still remember we had the challenge where it's like, read a chapter of John every day, because John's only 21 chapters, so you'll be done in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I started doing that, and then I did that, and then Acts, and then Romans, and then like it got so you just get into the habit, and
Yeah.
then before you know it, you're like feeling weird if it's 9 o'clock at night and you haven't read yet. So,
Yeah.
So camp was great. That's actually the camp where I got called into ministry. So
Yeah.
that was a big year. But so after camp, I'm sure you still are in town. You're going to
Yeah,
school
stuck here.
at Savannah Tech. How has your semester been, and what was it like with like all of your friends kind of dispersing across Georgia and across the Southeast?
It's this past semester has been very crazy. School has been tougher than it's ever been for me. Like normally I just get A's in schools. I don't really have to study except for like the night before the tests, and then like stuff was easy. Not to brag, I guess.
Brag,
I don't know.
yeah.
But I mean it was easy. I didn't really have to study much. But no, the program at Savannah Tech, I'm doing aviation maintenance because of course you need to know how to fly a plane, but you also need to know how to work on them when you're in those like remote locations. So I'm doing this for the next 2 years, or I guess a year and a half now. But yeah, it's been really difficult, and with school being so difficult, it's kind of eating away at the time that I spend with the Lord, you know. But kind of side note, it wasn't till this semester is when I had remembered about middle school and the suicidal thoughts, because like like one of the coping mechanisms is like forgetting.
Yeah.
So that was definitely one for me that it was subconscious. I didn't even like think about it really, but it was one phone call during my lunch break. I called you and I was like, when I realized just how good God has been, because I was in middle school thinking about killing myself, and I probably was going to do it. And then God revealed his plan for my life, and it was like, oh, wow.
Yeah. I remember because I had just listened to Bryce Crawford's testimony. If anyone hasn't listened to it, that testimony is a great one.
Yeah.
But it's a similar story where, like, for him, he was, like, the day that he was going to commit suicide, and then he met Jesus then. And he has this famous quote that I love, and I know it applies to you as well, of, like, I didn't want my life, so I gave it to somebody who did. And like that even applies to you, because
Yeah.
didn't want it, and then God said, no, you're flying a plane for me.
Yeah.
You're gonna go to remote countries and fly airplanes for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, yeah, that's really just what I'm doing now. Just trying to get my maintenance stuff done, then going to whatever college to do the rest of my flight training, and then maybe being a flight instructor for a bit, and then moving off to JARS to do that.
Dude, that's gonna be so fun. I
Yeah.
can't wait to hear all about that. Man, I sit here and I hear that story, and I'm like, that's awesome. I can't wait to go see all the crazy things you're doing.
Yeah.
The two of us are doing production ministry, so there's going to be some crazy concert one day where both of us are at. And Charlie will just be, understanding he's going to be solving the universe over here, while the rest of us are just turning on and off light bulbs and flying an airplane. Well, I really appreciate this episode, guys.
Yeah.
I want to make this a normal thing, because testimonies are just so important, and I think everyone's story, everyone can relate to in a different way. And so this definitely will not be the last one. We're definitely going to have more testimony episodes.
Yeah. And I remember telling you when you did the first one, like, it was the other testimony episode was the first one you ever put out,
First
right?
one,
First ever episode,
Yeah.
my testimony.
I remember telling you, like, that's such a beautiful way to open the podcast that you started, because, like, that's how, for those of you who don't know, Lucas starts most of his conversations with Christians, being like, tell me your story.
Yeah.
And it's brought some amazing people into your life, for sure.
And it's one of those things where not every single one of you said something that I'm like, yep, I've been there. I've related with that one. And so it's just, I feel like people don't like sharing their stories. And so getting people out of their comfort zone to share their story, and then
it can be tough. Very
you
tough.
never know. And I even had, last episode, I had a handful of friends that were like, I want to go share my testimony because of it. So thank you guys for being willing. I know there'll
Absolutely.
be more people that are going to do it. And we'll see you guys next week for the next episode.